Welcome back to AM Northwest. You know, our next guest says that empathy can be a superpower. We welcome back the author of several books, but her newest one is The Genius of Empathy, Dr. Judith Orloff. Good to see you again.
Oh, it's so great to see you
Yeah, it's
too.
been a while. First of all, let's kind of figure this out here. What is empathy? What does it really mean? Because a lot of people confuse it with sympathy.
Yeah, so empathy is the ability to see someone, to hear someone, to value them, and attune to where they're coming from.
Like you can put yourself in their shoes, is what you're
You
saying.
can put yourself in their shoes and you care.
Yeah. How important is showing empathy to everyone, really?
If you want to have good relationships, you have to have empathy. I mean, imagine not having empathy with your spouse or your children or your friends. But if you show them empathy, meaning, I hear what you're saying, I'm going to give it some consideration as opposed to just arguing,
Right.
It's a whole different thing, because when people feel heard, they're more likely to come together with you versus alienating them with polarizing or arguing or needing to be right.
How then do we treat ourselves with more empathy? That's an issue too, isn't it? A lot of us don't do that.
Huge. There's a chapter in The Genius of Empathy on self-empathy. And instead of beating ourselves up, if you've had a hard day, you know what goes on in your head.
Yeah.
And everybody, has a tendency to beat.
Especially early in the morning. Or, you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, why did I do that? Yeah.
That's right. But self-empathy is different. It's saying you had a really hard day and you did your best. And bravo.
Okay, so tell me then, how do we practice empathy? Like, give me an example of what we can do to practice empathy with, say, family members, and maybe some family members or coworkers that we may not get along with very well. What do you suggest?
Right. Well, what you don't want to do is get into arguments with them.
Okay.
And so you want to empathize with what is good about them. Like, for instance, if you have a chronic talker at work and they distract you, you want to say something like, I really care about what you're going through, but I need to get back to my project now. Good luck. I'll hold good thoughts about it.
Yeah.
Instead of looking into their eyes and saying, oh, tell me more. And then your day is shot because they'll just be talking to you the whole time.
Well, and that's a good point, because people who are really, or empaths who are really sensitive would tend to say, tell me more, when really they need to get to work.
Absolutely. That's what I teach empaths, to set boundaries. Boundaries are so key when you come to empathy. You don't just show empathy 24 hours a day, every day.
Oh, you'd be worn out.
You'd be exhausted.
Yeah.
So you have to practice self-care and setting boundaries. Sometimes I say no. No is a complete sentence. To say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I wish I could, but I can't. And you say it nice, but you do say it, and you say it in a very short tone of voice. That's an empathic communication. You don't want to get into any confrontations.
Yeah.
And if you're with somebody you don't agree with, you can just say, I hear what you're saying, and I'll take it under consideration, as opposed to, your beliefs don't make any sense, and start getting into it.
Well, now there are people whose beliefs don't make any sense.
That's true.
Yeah, right? So then
That's
how do
true.
you, let's say it's something like that. How do you let them know you heard them, but you're not going to, give them anything? Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly. You say, I'm hearing what you're saying.
Okay.
And I'm going to give it some thought.
Okay, that's a good one. What about relationships when it comes to family members? Because that's really tricky.
It's really tricky, but in the book I go through different types of family members and how you'll deal with them. For instance, the narcissist, or the passive-aggressive person, or the one who dumps anger. They're all different, how you deal with them. But in terms of anger, I have a no anger rule, where people are dumping anger versus showing respectful attention.
Right.
I just say, I've got to go. And I teach my patients that if they're around somebody who dumps anger, to just gently remove themselves from the situation. It's very toxic to be around somebody who's dumping anger.
And don't you think sometimes these angry people, it's a habit that they've learned, and they're angry at everything. Every day the traffic is horrible. Every day this doesn't taste good, or every day this or that.
And
it's just a way that they vent, right?
It could be, but they can get very toxic and destructive if they vent on you.
Right.
And if you're an empath, who's somebody who's very sensitive and open and wants to please people, to just sit there and have the anger dumped is not a healthy thing.
Right. You soak it all up.
You soak it all
up. I get you.
Empathy isn't a doormat. I want to make that clear.
Okay.
I want to make that clear. Empathy is not a doormat. It's being able to assert yourself in a kind way, but also learning how to set limits.
Okay. And then tell me about the different styles. There are 4 styles, you say, of empathy. And how do you determine which one is yours?
Well, there's cognitive empathy. Those are people who feel more with their minds, the more linear people. There's emotional empathy, where you feel with your heart, but you may get too involved with someone and get drained from that.
Right, right.
And then there's intuitive empathy, where your intuition, you feel what's going on with somebody intuitively, with your gut feeling, or your energy is going up or down. And then there's spiritual empathy, where you see the best in somebody, but at the expense of not seeing the whole person.
Right. Well, don't you think that last one you just mentioned there, I can think of people who get easily taken in by cons, scams, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they see only the best in people when you need to see that person may not be the greatest, right?
Yes, that's right. So I work with people who have spiritual empathy to see the whole person so that they can be realistic.
Okay.
So
what kind of empath would you say you are? Like, what kind of empathy style is yours?
I think more an emotional empath, because I really feel for people.
Right.
And I'm a feeling person. I'm a feeler. That's what an emotional empath is.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about someone that you may run into who has empathy deficit disorder.
Yes, there's a whole
That's
chapter
interesting.
in the book on empathy.
Yeah.
Yes, there's some people who do not have empathy.
No.
And these are the narcissists, the psychopaths, and the sociopaths. And these are people who are not wired neurologically to have empathy. And it's so hard for empathic people to get that,
Right.
as they think, if only I treated them better, if only I gave them the benefit of the doubt, I could heal them.
Yeah. But you can't. You can't change them. Yeah.
You're not the full-blown malignant narcissist.
Yeah.
You can't. If somebody just has some narcissistic traits, maybe.
Yeah.
There's more hope there. But the ones that are wired differently, they don't feel it.
Right.
What narcissists are into is power, and they're not into love. Empathy people and empaths are into love.
Okay.
They want to connect. They want to love.
They just want to love people.
They do.
Okay. What is the takeaway from readers for the genius of empathy, you think?
The takeaway is you could begin to practice self-empathy right now, today. You could begin to treat yourself differently,
Right.
and to create more of a positive biological environment and emotional environment within you. It's being kind to yourself. It's a different way of being other than beating yourself up.
Absolutely. The book again is titled The Genius of Empathy. Dr. Judith Orloff, thank you so much. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
All right, we'll be right back with more AM Northwest. Don't go away.